Welcome to Our House, the only complete on-air resource for your home ownership needs. Now, here's the host of Our House, Peter Hunt.
Good morning and welcome to Our House. This is Peter Hunt, and this show is brought to you by the all-new huntrealestate.com, where everything is truly easier for your real estate and home ownership experience. This show is also brought to you by Hunt Mortgage. Hunt Mortgage is the home of the pre-purchase commitment in today's very active real estate market. And also in our very low interest rate market, you will want to know exactly not just what you can afford through a pre-qualification is what most lenders call it, but actually through a commitment on a mortgage, which you can get with absolutely no risk and no charge by calling Hunt Mortgage today. It's 633-3700. We have a very special show for you today. We're going to be departing from some of our, usual topics relative to the development issue in Western New York, although we will be addressing that in a kind of a different way today through my very special guest in the studio with me today, who is Dr. Gary Olson, the president of Damon College. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Peter.
Gary, first of all, just so our listeners know a little bit about who Gary Olson is, how long have you been here and how did you get to Buffalo?
Well, I'm in my third year as president. Previously, I had been vice president and provost at Idaho State University for 4 or 5 years, and before that at Illinois State as dean of arts and sciences.
So your PhD is in what area?
English, specifically in rhetoric.
And I guess that would bode well for being a president of a university.
Well, it helps sometimes. That's true.
But anyway, how does a person with a background in higher education is essentially, I'm assuming, is teaching fundamentally in research. How do you transition from that to becoming a college president or administrator?
Well, it's a good question. They are completely different skills in a way, and so not everybody can make that transition. You have to know a lot about how to, think outside of your own discipline. When you're trained in one particular discipline like chemistry or English, let's say, you tend to be narrowly involved in that. And so in order to take on the administrative jobs, you have to be able to not think just as a chemist or an English professor, but you have to be able to think in the broader sense of the common good.
That's a very interesting transition that you'd have to make. And I know that, as you point out, not many people can make it, and I do know that when there's a position opening like a presidency of a college or university, that it's a very, very competitive environment, and I'm sure that your experience and proven skill, made a big difference in your selection here at Damon. So how have you found Western New York, I guess, in general, and then specifically, how was Damon when you arrived here as you expected?
Well, I love Buffalo, actually. I'm from Connecticut originally, even though I've been everywhere else since. And it's almost like a homecoming. I know Connecticut's a little bit different from Buffalo, but it's very similar in many ways. So I feel very much at home here. As far as Damon is concerned, I was very surprised. I knew it was a good quality school. I knew that there was a real belief in good teaching. I assumed that, unlike the research universities that I was used to, that there wasn't much faculty research going on, and that was wrong. I was wrong. There's a lot of very good researchers at Damon, working on cures for things, writing books, doing all kinds of laboratory research. So it's a very vibrant faculty.
And what is how big a school is Damon today, and what's the trajectory that the school is on, and what would you describe as your fortes?
Well, we're in and around 3,000 students. In a way, the college is split in half. We have the traditional arts and science disciplines, and then we have the professional disciplines, business and education, and the healthcare. Healthcare tends to be a real specialty. We have one of the finest physician assistance programs and physical therapy programs and nursing. Very, very high demand to get in. In fact, it's not unusual for 22 seats to have 1,000 applications.
Really?
So it's very competitive. I get calls sometimes from parents saying, "Well, so and so has such high grades, but still couldn't get in." Well, I know, but somebody else had higher grades and better qualifications. So we are known for that. Now, historically, the college has always been very good in art. It started out basically as a liberal arts college and then morphed into a more diverse set of areas. And we still are strong in art as well. So that is one of our fortes as well.
The history of the school is kind of interesting in terms of its beginnings with the Sisters of St. Francis and then the transition to a lay board and a lay effective ownership. That wasn't always the smoothest of experiences, but since that initial transition took place and some I would describe as contentious moments, I happen to be around at that time. Mm-hmm. We've overcome that, and I think have a very strong relationship with the Sisters of St. Francis. How does the heritage of the school play into its I guess the direction and curriculum even?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it plays in because we're so strong in what's called service learning. Service learning is basically a community service connected to particular classes, and we have a real commitment to service learning. In fact, Damon students each year provide about 30,000 hours of community service in the Buffalo, Niagara region. Wow. And I say that because it's part of the requirements for graduation that students do so many hours. And now this is tied to particular classes. So somebody in an English class might be helping adult learners who never really learned how to read or write learn to read and write. Or I know our accounting students will be out helping the underprivileged do their tax forms, for example. The healthcare people will be out giving free exams and so on. So this is a really good way to be giving back to the community. And the reason I think that's connected to our history is that, of course, the Sisters of St. Francis were very much involved with community service and giving back to the community.
With this whole issue and where the things you're doing in the community, for example, what the students are doing, kind of begs a question in my mind about where Damon fits in a community like Western New York. And you've got other schools that are other private institutions here in town. And in this very competitive world we're in, for high-quality students throughout the country, and also the demographics as they're playing out in this country, relative just to the sheer numbers of students that are have the background and the demographic mix that would fit in a school like Damon. How do you see Damon evolving in terms of its place here in Western New York?
Well, we are evolving. We have quite a few niche areas that are unique to us and that provide a service to potential students. So, for example, we just opened up a master's in public health and a master's in social work. And these areas, are small but high quality, and so it provides that opportunity for people that want to come and get those kinds of credentials. We have another niche area in the arts called visual effects. Visual effects is I'd like to think of it as the Photoshop for video. Nowadays, everything is touched up. It's not just how they shot a scene. So they'll shoot scenes and then they'll bring it back, and in post-production they might change everything around. So they might say, well, we shot it in summer, but it's supposed to be winter, make it a winter scene. They'll say we shot it in daylight, but it should be twilight, make it a night scene. I mean, it's incredible. And so the visual effects people are the ones that go in and frame by frame make these changes to the film. Well, Damon was one of the recipients of one of the Buffalo Billion grants from the governor. We got about $2 million, and industry partner that we have got another, I think, $2 million. And we now have one of the most sophisticated visual effects production studios probably in the country right now.
Is that on campus, or is...
It's a little bit down from campus, about probably 2 miles in the Tri-Main building on Main Street. And it's a very, very good facility. And we're side by side with that corporate partner. And the corporate partner has contracts with filmmakers, with commercial. For example, the Star-Kissed Sorry Charlie commercial has been revived. Well, we did that.
Really?
And it had been, when you and I grew up, we
Sure.
saw that every day on TV, and then for a while it was not used anymore. Well, the company revived it, and our corporate partner got the contract, and some of our students got to work on that.
When you say you partner with private industry, this is an interesting concept, and I think it's lost on a lot of our listeners. What does that mean? Does that mean that you are effectively contracting work from a private organization, and then the school receives funding from that company to do that research or work, or how does that work exactly?
Well, no, the company is situated in the Tri-Main, right, literally next door. I mean, we actually share some space. And so they're helping to train our students. Of course, we have professors that are part of Damon and not part of the company. But the availability of that real world kind of work right there is what makes it unique. So in other words, they're not like you might get a visual effects degree somewhere else that doesn't have this arrangement, and they come out of there with all the theory, but they haven't sat down and actually done a sun-kissed commercial, say. So it's a little different.
So are these kind of guided internships as part of the education, as part of the curriculum, or is it a course that's taught there that has a specific project orientation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes from day to day, really. Obviously, there's a specific curriculum there, and the two entities work hand in hand. And the good part about it is that there's the promise of actual real employment when the student graduates. Now, sometimes that's full-time. I think they've recently hired 10 full-time people, but sometimes it's part-time as well as work comes in. So there are different arrangements, and it depends, of course, on one's skill level when one graduates.
Is this in any way, shape, or form part of or would this be in any way, shape, or form similar to Startup New York, where have other businesses come to the school and said, we want to use the intellectual capital that exists on campus and piggyback on that to create jobs here in Western New York? I mean, you just mentioned that 10 kids might be hired, for example. Right.
Well, it's similar but not the same. With the startup, the way I understand it, the college can designate a site and then invite in a company that maybe is not even from New York, and then they would get the tax breaks. As it turns out, in this particular industry, the governor had already gotten through the legislature special tax breaks for film production and post-production. So they already have that available to them. And so that is in part what attracted this company, Empire Visual Effects is the name of the company, to partner with us. And what the governor's hope was, and still is that the climate in Buffalo is so good for post-production that other companies will want to come here. Why stay in New York City or Los Angeles with the high costs of doing business when this work can be done here? Now, it is true that a lot of this work has been sent abroad to India and China mostly. But I think with the tax breaks and with the low cost of doing business here in Buffalo, it's pretty competitive now, and so what they're hoping is a lot of these jobs will return and come to the Buffalo, Niagara area.
This is, I guess, that in my mind also causes me to think about the real contribution schools like Damon make to the asset value of our community. Our mission in this show is to help our listeners protect and enhance their investment in Western New York, and I've always been a believer that a lot of that depends on the strength of our institution of higher education, of which Damon obviously is a long-term. Gentlemen, I think we've lost our...
What's going on, Peter?
I don't hear anything.
I have to tell you that. I have to figure it out.
Okay. Well, there we go. Excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. We had a little technical difficulty there. I was just asking my guest, Dr. Olson, about the contribution to the asset value of our community of schools like Damon. Now, that's a broad question, but obviously the school itself has made a significant investment in its location, and obviously now in the Tri-Main, and in programming, and in degrees that have a direct employment opportunity when you graduate. I think one of the things that makes physical therapy and physician's assistant and now the Masters in Public Health so attractive is that your employability once you graduate is almost guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, especially in those areas. It's interesting you ask about this because just 2 weeks ago, the Commission on Independent Colleges and Universities in New York released a report. They have an annual report on the economic impact of the independent colleges. And I'm sorry I don't have it with me. I could give you the broader
Sure.
How much all of the independents, but I do know what Damon's. In 2013, the economic impact of Damon College was $132 million in the Buffalo, Niagara region, and that accounts for about $3.5 million in tax revenue, and over $26 million that students and visitors just generate in economic activity. So, we're not UB, we're not a big research institution, but we sure play our part. $132 million in 1 year is pretty significant.
And does that reflect, Dr. Olson, does that reflect a broadening geographic appeal of a school like Damon? I mean, for a long time, obviously, we were fairly regional in terms of our draw. So we were, I guess it could be argued that in that context, we're moving dollars around within our region. But one of the great things about many schools is their ability to draw new dollars into the community. Right.
Yeah, and that's reflected in those figures. We have students from 25 states, and I think it's now 46 nations. So these are students that have come to the Buffalo area just specifically to attend Damon. And, that does come into the mix, as you say.
And I think that's huge. And it's something that is not necessarily on most of our listeners or anybody's radar screen in terms of their day-to-day thinking. But we drive by the school, we see it there. Isn't that nice? And looks pretty. And, they continue to improve. And the new research centers on the campus, that's all great stuff. But really, it's much broader than that.
Right, and don't forget the faculty too. We're constantly recruiting new faculty, which means that we're bringing into the Buffalo area a highly educated workforce, if you will, and these are people more often than not coming from other states where they went to the university or college and coming and settling here. And more often than not, it's not just the one professor. The professor's spouse is usually equally highly educated, and if not in higher education and other areas.
And we'll be right back with more from our House to Yours with Gary Olson after these important messages.
If you're a homeowner age 62 or older, you owe it to yourself to look into a reverse mortgage. Reverse mortgages give seniors many different options to access the equity in their home. There's even a reverse mortgage for purchase available. For more information, call Karen Johnson, a reverse mortgage specialist at Hunt Mortgage at 633-3700 or visit huntmortgage.com. Karen Johnson, NMLS number 485939. Hunt Mortgage is a licensed mortgage banker, New York Department of Financial Services, and an equal opportunity lender.
Welcome back to our house. This is Peter Hunt, and the show is brought to you by the all-new huntrealestate.com, where everything is truly easier for your real estate and home ownership experience. Huntrealestate.com is the only place on the web where you can find a complete inventory of homes, not just here in Buffalo, Niagara, but also in Rochester and Syracuse and Watertown, Utica, the greater Albany area, and even Phoenix, Arizona. In addition to all those houses, you're going to find access to a complete set of home ownership services at our house, which is sponsored by huntrealestate.com. Anyway, this show is also brought to you by Hunt Mortgage, and Hunt Mortgage is the home of the low rate and closing cost guarantee, and also the home of the pre-purchase commitment, which is one of the greatest opportunities you have in today's market to effectively make your offer on your next purchase that much more competitive, effectively making your offer cash. All you have to do is dial 633-3700, talk to one of our mortgage consultants this morning, and ask them how you could not just qualify, but actually be pre-committed for a mortgage. There is no risk and no charge. I'd encourage you to call today. It's the only place of its kind where you can do that. And also, I've been warning you all along that interest rates will rise sooner or later, and each time I say that, they don't. But the fact of life is we listen with great interest to what the Federal Reserve says at its quarterly meetings, and they have given every indication that rates will stay somewhat stable and where they are near historic lows for the next couple months. But that's not the whole story with mortgage interest rates. You have to have a sophisticated look at what's happening in the bond market and elsewhere in the economy to really understand the direction of mortgage interest rates. But right now they're stable and near historic lows, and I encourage you to call Hunt Mortgage at 633-3700 today. If you have general inquiry about real estate, 633-9400 is the Hunt Real Estate Customer Service Center, the only one of its kind in North America. Our customer service representatives are waiting for your call right now to either answer your question right there on the phone or direct you to the appropriate professional for whatever it is you may need, whether you're considering buying or selling a home, mortgaging a home, financing in any way, shape, or form, insuring a home, or even fixing up the one you have. And that's a simple call, 633-9400, the only one of its kind in North America. We have a very special show for you here today. In the studio with me today is Dr. Gary Olson. Dr. Olson is the president of Damon College. Many of you are aware of Damon College, its presence in Amherst, New York, actually in part of Amherst known as Snyder, on a 36-acre campus, I believe. Is that correct, Gary?
That's right.
And we have a kind of landlocked there, but it's a little jewel in real estate, as I like to look at it anyway, from my perspective. It's some of the nicest real estate in Western New York, and you're smack dab right in the middle of it. How just as a point of interest, how has that location helped or not helped in terms of recruiting students, faculty, even you, for example?
I think it helps a lot. Amherst is regularly named one of the safest communities in the country. And Damon, of course, is right in the middle in a particularly even safer area than the larger Amherst. So in a way, it's a little Garden of Eden. It's not like being in an urban area, let's say, where you have particular challenges if you're trying to run a college. And I think there's a sense of safety there that faculty and staff and students feel. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I mean, if you look at our Clery numbers, the Clery Act is a federal act where every college is required to report all criminal activity on a yearly basis. It's a sort of a consumer-friendly gesture. And, I'm always surprised when I look at our numbers because they're so low. Because any college you're going to have things happen. Somebody's purse gets stolen or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I think the location there, as you call it, that particular real estate, really makes a difference in making it a particularly safe and inviting place.
And of course, that's kind of a hot topic today, as there's more and more discussion of safety for all people on college campuses today. And I know that our Senator Gillibrand and others have been focused on this. How has that impacted your role as president of a school like Damon? Is this just a distraction because we don't have a problem like that at Damon, or is it something that we all have to be aware of?
Right. Well, the problem that you're referring to is the sexual assault prevention. I think Senator Gillibrand and the governor are being very proactive. If you think about it, you have a bunch of young people, first time away from home often, coming to college, no supervision from parents and so on, and, exploring sexuality and all. And sometimes there's alcohol available that wasn't available before. Mm-hmm. And so things happen. And sometimes not very nice things happen. And so I think what the new push is to really educate young people that no means no, that just getting somebody drunk, it doesn't give you a license to do what you want. But this is an educational process. And I think what some of the legislators have found is that in the past, some colleges have tried to make believe that this wasn't a problem. Well, it's a problem everywhere. Mm-hmm. And there's an easy fix to it. And I like to think Damon has been ahead of the game there. We have a very strong procedures and programs in place. In fact, just recently we conducted a climate survey among the students to see their thoughts about, this kind of safety. We sponsor a whole week of sexual assault prevention educational programming so that students can understand the implications of their actions and so on. So some of the highly visible stories that you hear, from fraternities and all and other parts of the country, these can happen on any college campus, but if you have tough procedures and a good educational program, it's going to diminish the possibility of that happening. Our program is so admired around in higher education here that Dr. Nair, who is our vice president for Student Affairs, was asked to be the co-chair of the Western New York Consortium of Colleges and Universities Task Force on Sexual Assault. And the governor chose Damon to have the lieutenant governor, Kathy Hochul, come and give a special public forum on sexual assault because they were impressed with what we were doing. So we must be doing something right.
This is it's so interesting to me because I think we as a society expect a lot of young people that have been living under their parents' wings for their whole life, mm-hmm. and then all of a sudden they're not there anymore. Parents aren't there anymore. The tempering influence, there's not the kind of clear moral direction they may be receiving from their parents. All of a sudden that's all gone.
That's right. And
all of a sudden they're in things like alcohol that they might have had access to, but now pretty much if they really want it they can get it. And it seems to me that this boils down to really two things that are very, very difficult, I think, for young people to understand. And the last kind of buzz topic of diversity was one that I think addressed some of this as well. That when you're living in a house with your parents and you're in kind of an insulated environment, you're hopefully taught mutual respect and that kind of thing. But all of a sudden you're exposed to groups that you've never seen before, 46 different nationalities like you describe, and I sometimes see people look at it like a curiosity, and I think that in that environment, it tends to, I think, make it more difficult for kids to really adjust their behaviors. And am I dreaming or something, or is it just that we expect a lot of our kids?
Well, no, I think you described it well. There must be a kind of shock value of going from that more insulated environment at home with your parents, all of a sudden to having, I wouldn't say total freedom, because of course colleges have rules that you can't do this and you can't do that. But, you don't have that constant supervision. You might have a resident assistant watching the floor where your dormitory room is, but, you're an adult now. You're expected to act like an adult. And so on the one hand, this is why the college experience is such a valuable one, because it gives you an opportunity to learn to be a responsible adult if you do it right. And that's why I tell everybody, go away to college. That's important. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that you can just, act like there are no laws.
And go wild.
And go wild,
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, it's. I think it's hard for a lot of people to accept others because not only are they learning a set of mores and kind of rules of existence in their home, but they're also all of a sudden there's a whole new set of influences. Mm-hmm. And a whole set of different responsibilities. You've got to show up for class, or you're supposed to,
right.
and you've got to do homework, and you've got to set aside study time, and there's pressure to party and have a good time, or compete in sports and all kinds of things. So you're thrown into this wild environment, and I think it kind of concerns me sometimes that we expect as much as we do of students, and then come down hard on them, I guess, when things don't go well, and that will happen.
Well, that will happen, and especially if you're involved in sexual assault. I mean, there needs
Right.
to be a zero tolerance for
Absolutely.
that kind of thing. But on the other hand, if you, most colleges provide a lot of, guidance along these areas. There are activities that the colleges put on that are wholesome activities and so on. There's the various kinds of educational opportunities like the ones in and around sexual assault that I mentioned. And if you don't avoid those and participate, you're much more likely to grow as a result.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's critically important. We're about to go to a break, but I want to remind our listeners, if they have any questions for Dr. Olson, the president of Damon College, you can reach us here in the studio at 803-0930 or 1-800-626-9236 if you're long distance, and star 930 if you're mobile. And please call with your questions or comments about anything about Damon College, higher education, or even real estate. And we'll be back after these very important messages from our house to yours.
Recently, the Department of HUD reduced mortgage insurance premiums on FHA loans. If you closed an FHA loan between June 2009 and now, you are likely paying more for your mortgage insurance than you need to. This is Linda Malaya, president of Hunt Mortgage. Let us give you a no-cost, no-obligation review of your current mortgage. You may qualify for a streamlined refinance and a significant monthly savings on your mortgage payment. Visit huntmortgage.com for further details.
Hunt Mortgage is a licensed mortgage banker, New York Department of Financial Services, and an equal opportunity lender.
Welcome back to our house. This is Peter Hunt, and the show is brought to you by the all-new HuntRealEstate.com, where everything is truly easier for your real estate and home ownership experience. The show is also brought to you by Hunt Mortgage. Hunt Mortgage is the home of the pre-purchase commitment. I encourage you to call today, 633-3700, and we're coming into the spring market, as we call it here in the real estate industry and throughout the industry in this country, and it's the most active time in the real estate year between now and the summertime. And I encourage you to go into that market armed with effectively your cash. And the only way for you to know that is to either have the cash in the bank, which is not all that common these days, or that you have a pre-purchase commitment, which says that that a lender will commit to loaning you this money to buy a home up to X number of dollars in value, so that when you walk in, your offer is effectively cash, which is a huge opportunity for you. Also, this weekend, today, we have open houses. Tomorrow, we will be, for the most part, respecting the Easter holiday, and it's also Passover, and we want to wish everyone who celebrates those holidays to have a very happy holiday season, and also to a very happy, safe holiday season as well. But stop into one of our open houses and ask our agents about the seller security plan. It's the only place in the market where you can find out directly from an agent exactly how this program works, which is very simple. We will sell your home, or ERA will buy it. It's a huge opportunity for you today, so stop into one of our many open houses today. I'm in the studio today with Dr. Gary Olson. Dr. Olson is the president of Damon College for the last 3 years and coming to our community by way of Idaho and Illinois before that, and we're happy to have Dr. Olson in our community. It's always great to have new intellectual thought entering our community. And during the break, you're just about to mention something you'd like to bring up in terms of the direction of the college relative to the whole community.
Right. Well, you were talking about the importance of that real estate there on Main Street, and I wanted to give you an update. Not long ago, I think Damon College purchased the old YMCA building, which is across the street,
right.
Not too far from a Hunt Realty office, I think.
Yeah, exactly where it is.
And
where I started my first experience at the YMCA was at that building.
There you go.
Fifth grade.
And this is a building from the 60s, so it's one of the typical kind of ugly brick boxes, if you will. Well, we're putting a huge investment into that building, and it's going to be the Damon Wellness Center.
Really?
It's going to look nothing like it does now. It's going to look like a modern, beautiful modern building. And so this contributes to the to the community by taking, an old, I won't call it an eyesore, but not a very attractive building. And in its place will be something that I think people will be very proud of.
Will you be expanding the building?
No, not the same footprint, but there'll be now a front door on Main Street, which it didn't have. You had to go into through the back before, and it won't be that ugly brick. It'll be a kind of stucco look to it, and so it's yet another way that the school is contributing to the well-being of the community. And in fact, I'll name one more. I don't know if you were over in that area recently, Peter, but recently we installed a very nice decorative stone wall along the first only half of the front of the campus, and it just really ties everything together. I think a lot of times people who aren't familiar with Damon drive by and they know Damon is in that area, but they're not sure which buildings are part of the college and which aren't. Well, now with the wall, it's clear. And we just got permission from the Historical Society to continue that wall over to Gettsville and then down Gettsville.
Oh, really?
So that'll complete the project, and it'll be quite stunning.
You also began, I remember one of your first things when you came in as president was a tree planting process. How are we doing with that?
Well, we planted 146 trees, and I'm looking forward to this spring to see them bloom. When you plant new trees, sometimes there are some that don't make it, and so we did have that, and we had to replace them. But now we'll know what the real effect will be as we go into spring.
Dr. Olson, we have a couple callers on the line. The first caller is Gustav from Williamsville. Gustav, how can we help you?
Thank you. I'm just curious about Damon's involvement or not in internet or remote learning, as so many of the universities are doing, and if that presents a threat to on-campus education.
Yeah.
Interesting question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, we are doing more and more of the online educational opportunities. Some schools are plunging into it in a big way. We're not doing that. We're trying to go in cautiously. I think most of the programs that we have that make use of online are what they call hybrid. That is, some of it is online and some of it is in front of your instructor. So it's not just a whole class, let's say, online, which you can get in some places. I really personally think that that's a much healthier way to do it. I would hate to think of having gone through 4 years of colleges. I think some people can now without ever sitting in a classroom and just sitting at home in their pajamas and, doing projects online.
Well, as we've talked about, kind of the other side of that whole social experience we were describing earlier, and the maturation process is not possible in that environment.
That's exactly right.
The Damon has been kind of at the forefront also in the whole conversion of traditional libraries to learning resource centers. Describe Damon's kind of, I don't know, I can't remember what we call it now, but a learning resource center that's really quite a place.
Yes, we call it the RIC, or Research Information Commons. And it's very interesting. Peter, when you and I went to school, of course, the center of things was the library, and we spent hours and hours in what often was called the stacks, doing the reading that we had to do for classes and so on. Well, nowadays, there's so much of that, the books and journals and so on are online or digitized, that you really don't need a physical book because you can access it on a screen. So the old style library, what we grew up with, really is kind of passé in a way. So the facility you're talking about, which replaces the library, is called the Research Information Commons. Commons means that it's a place where students can gather and maybe even in groups do group projects. But instead of stacks of books, you have all kinds of computer monitors and places to gather and sit and do research together. And I tell you, in a lot of schools, people try to avoid the library as much as possible. Here at the RIC, we even get students from other colleges that just want to go over and study in that nice environment because it's a nice modern environment. So it really has become a hub for us.
That's very interesting, and I think what our first caller was asking about really was how, I think it indirectly, the impact on the I guess the evolution of that kind of education, just because of cost. I mean, it's costly to buy books, and if you can access things online, it makes it a lot. I hope anyway, more cost effective. We have another caller is Bob from Clarence. Bob, how can we help you?
Hi, Dr. Olson. I was wondering about the origin of the name Damon. I believe the school used to be called Rosier Hill in the past. What was the significance of the word Damon was, and is there any religious aspect to the school left anymore? Is it all secular?
That's a very good question.
Okay, yes, a good question. It is secular. Well, it originally, as you know, was the Sisters of St. Francis. And as Peter mentioned, at a certain time in its history, it was not doing well financially, and the board made a change, and it became secular and not part of that the order anymore. But as part of the agreements, it wasn't. We wanted to keep the close ties, so we have two right now of the sisters are on our board. And a few of them are living in residences right on the campus. So although it's not a religious college, we still have those kinds of ties. The word Damon was chosen as a gesture to the sisters because Damon is the surname of the founder of the Sisters of St. Francis. And so they chose that name as a way to honor them.
It's interesting, the what you're referring to is also part of our campus, which are the properties along Getzel Road that some had been acquired for the very purpose of housing members of the order, and as times change, they move elsewhere, and so we still have two residents there.
I believe three. Yeah.
Well, that's great, and it's certainly a wonderful setting there.
It is, right.
And I think it should be noted that there's also been a continuous, year after year, not just a human investment on the part of the order, but a financial investment as well, that they're great partners of the college.
Oh, they are. They're very much so. And we often have them involved in our events, and we like to go to their events as well.
Which is a wonderful thing, and I know that they are also owners of some very fine real estate, too.
Well, you would know that better than anybody, Peter.
And I've had the pleasure of meeting with them about that, which is a great thing for our community as well. Just going back to some of the, the kind of core issues that schools like Damon face, look out a few years, if you would, Gary, and in terms of the demographics and how you see our society shaping up and where schools like Damon will fit in that going forward. Because there's been a lot of talk about the demographics and the changes and how that's impacting really the long-term viability of many schools in this country.
Right. What's meant by the demographics changing is that the kids of the baby boomer generation are now tapering off. So, there is a huge influx of college-age kids for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And there no longer are that many. So each year there are fewer and fewer college-age kids that come up. However, the colleges got used to a particular enrollment size, and so they're always trying to duplicate the same enrollment size, which of course is going to be physically impossible. Unless you go out and have more and more international students. Mm-hmm. Now, that's one way that some colleges are working. They're trying to bring in more and more international students. But I think we're all going to have to, come to terms with the fact that we're all going to shrink a little bit. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to adjust your budget and everything else to smaller numbers. On the other hand, colleges that have very good high-demand niche areas, which is what we try to do, they tend to stay a little bit ahead of that. So, for example, you've heard in the news recently about several colleges nearby having serious problems with enrollment. Mm-hmm. We've managed to keep about even, so we're not experiencing that same trouble, at least yet.
Talk a little bit about the other things going on campus, Gary, in our last minute and a half or so in terms of, I know you've got Dr. Yanni Sirin speaking on campus, and tell us a little bit about that whole experience.
Yes, that's part of what we call Academic Festival. That's once a year we have Academic Festival. It's a celebration of academic excellence. It's on the 15th, and that's when all the students show off their productions, posters and papers and research projects. But the day before, April 14th, we have a distinguished speaker come in, and this year it's Dr. Yanni Sirin, who's the director of the Albright Knox Art Gallery, and he has a paper called Visual Literacy, Learning and Innovation Beyond the Gutenberg Galaxy. And he's a fascinating speaker, he's a fascinating person, a good friend, and I'm very much looking forward to that talk. And of course, this is open to the public, so anybody that hears this and wants to come to Damon on the 15th, by all means do so.
What time is it?
I believe it's at 7 o'clock. You can verify that by going on our website.
Dr. Gary Olson, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Peter.
I'd like to thank our listeners. We'll be back again next week at the same time. And remember, when it comes to real estate, Western New York is Hunt Country.